You can't wear that, not unless you're active duty. What secret could this order hide? That's what they told her right before she turned to leave. And when her shirt lifted, just a little, they saw it. A black tattoo between her shoulders. 5 numbers. Nothing decorative. Nothing ordinary. What happened next made a full-grown officer drop his clipboard and freeze. Because that ink, it didn't come from a beach parlor. It came from a mission that never made the news. Before we dive in, where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun hadn't yet cleared the hills when Lena Brody eased her old silver Tacoma through the main gate at Camp Archer. The desert morning was still cool, but heat was already stretching its fingers across the pavement, promising a scorcher by noon. The guard at the booth barely looked up, just waved her through like she was any other base contractor. To him, she probably was middle-aged, civilian clothes, no stickers on the bumper, nothing screaming rank or purpose. She didn't wear a full uniform, just black army PT shorts and a washed-out gray shirt with no nameplate, faded, soft from too many years and too many cycles through too many machines. Her duffel sat in the back seat, seatbelted like a passenger. She parked in the auxiliary lot near the admin building. The place was just starting to wake up. Recruits in formation were gathering at the far end of the track field, already stretching, lacing boots, trading nervous glances, their voices carried on the dry wind, sharp, high-pitched, full of energy that hadn't been dulled by deployment yet. Lena sat still for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing it in. This was not nostalgia. This was muscle memory. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Tight ponytail streaked with silver. Fine lines around eyes that used to scan the desert through NVGs. She was 47 now, hadn't worn rank in over a decade, but her back was still straight, shoulders still squared, and her dog tag still hung under her shirt, untouched since the day she first earned them. She stepped out, adjusting the strap of the duffel over one shoulder. Her movements were quiet, deliberate, nothing to prove, just a body trained long ago to never waste emotion. In her side pocket, she carried the folded orders authorization to assist with physical readiness training for female recruits. Voluntary, yes, but official. She'd said yes before Sergeant Major Bledsoe even finished asking. It wasn't about missing the army. Not exactly. It was about remembering who she was at 19, scared, green, and running beside women who knew how to push when it hurt. She never forgot what those women gave her. And today, maybe she could return that. The admin building stood cool and square ahead of her, blank and beige like every government box since the Cold War. She stepped inside and was hit with a blast of refrigerated air and fluorescent light. Safety posters covered the walls. A dusty banner near the ceiling read, "Excellence in all we do." Behind the front desk sat a young specialist, slouched in a chair with a desktop monitor glowing in his face. His nameplate read, SPC Morrison J. He looked up with a blink like he hadn't expected to be spoken to before 0900. "Morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" Lena nodded once and handed him the neatly folded orders from her jacket. Every crease was sharp. Her handwriting in black ink across the top margin marked the name of the contact who'd cleared her. "Morrison," she said quietly. "Name's Lena Brody, retired Sergeant First Class. Here to support morning evals. I should be on the roster." He unfolded the paper, scanning it with the glazed disinterest of someone who had processed too many civilians asking to get past the front desk. Behind him, 2 civilian admin workers sat organizing files. They were mid-conversation, laughter drifting just under their breath. The kind of soft mockery people think they can get away with when they believe no one's listening. "Ha!" Morrison muttered. "There's a Brody listed. D. Brody." He looked back up. His eyes fell on the PT shirt she wore. Something shifted in his posture. "Ma'am, I don't think that uniform's authorized for base access. Not unless you're active duty or in processing." Before Lena could answer, one of the civilian clerks spoke up without looking over. "Policy's clear," the woman said, flipping a manila folder. "You can't just wear pieces of uniform because you feel like it. It's not Halloween. The other clerk chuckled. People always think putting on an old shirt makes them part of it again. Doesn't. Lena didn't flinch. She stood quiet as the walls around her, not out of fear, just still, like she had learned long ago that silence was often louder than defense. Morrison cleared his throat. "I'll go check with my supervisor," he said, already sliding out from behind the desk. She stood in place as he disappeared down a side hallway. The civilian workers kept muttering something about wannabes in dress-up and PT gear from the thrift store. Through the front windows, Lena could see the recruits now circling the track, young legs moving in uneven rhythm, arms pumping awkwardly, still figuring out how to sync breath and stride. She watched them unmoving, her duffel rested at her feet. After a full minute, she reached down to pick it up. As she leaned forward, her shirt shifted just an inch, but it was enough. The hem lifted at her back just high enough to reveal skin weathered by sun and time. And etched into that skin, bold and permanent, were 5 numbers, 1375. The ink was stark, military black, not ornate, no flourish, just angular, compressed numbers like those stenciled on ammo crates. And below them, almost hidden, was a symbol, an owl with its wings spread wide, perched atop 2 crossed swords. It wasn't a tattoo you got for decoration, and it wasn't the kind you could look up online. Could this tattoo unlock a buried past? Most wouldn't notice, but someone did. Staff Sergeant Miguel Ortega had been walking past the front desk toward the maintenance hallway, clipboard under one arm, head down. He'd just come off a 10-hour night shift, checking backup generators for the barracks. He wasn't supposed to be paying attention, but his gaze caught on the numbers. He stopped so fast his boots squeaked against the waxed linoleum. The clipboard slipped from his fingers, hit the floor, bounced once, and clattered flat. His eyes stayed fixed on her back. He knew that tattoo not from service, not directly, but from an intelligence file, a redacted sitrep briefing he wasn't supposed to read closely, but had years ago when he was a corporal assigned to J2. He'd stared at those numbers for 2 weeks straight during an after-action review that never officially existed. Detachment 1375, Night Owl. It had been one of those black cell units. The kind that operated in the shadows. The kind you don't list on personnel trackers. The kind that held the line during things you're not supposed to talk about. The kind that got erased. He remembered the name of the operation even though it had no public record. Northern Gate, April 2000. He remembered the margin notes, no reinforcements. Held fallback quarter. 43 minutes. No survivors except one. The room suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Even the flicker of the overhead light seemed louder. Lena straightened up again, adjusted her duffel. Ortega took a slow step back, his throat dry, his fingers tingling. She had just been told she didn't belong here. But he knew better. She had stood on the worst day when others fell. She had bought time with pain, with endurance, with silence. And now, without a word, she was being told to walk away. His pulse quickened, not from fear, from knowing he had just seen something sacred, something hidden in plain sight. He turned on his heel and headed toward the back hallway, past the comms office, already pulling out a slip of paper from his back pocket, a number he'd memorized once long ago, with the understanding that he would never ever use it until today. Could this call change everything? Staff Sergeant Miguel Ortega stepped quickly through the side corridor, past the maintenance lockers, past the break room. No one cleaned properly. He didn't stop until he reached the reinforced door marked Communications, Authorized Access Only. The hall was empty. Good. No one to question why a maintenance NCO had business back here. He keyed in the access code, slipped inside, and locked the door behind him. The room smelled of coffee and dust. A single phone sat on the steel desk, old school, hardwired. Nothing digital about it. Ortega didn't sit. He stood there, heart thumping as he pulled out a folded slip of paper from his wallet, worn soft from years of being kept, but never used. The number was 10 digits, unlisted, untraceable, burned into his memory since the day he'd read that redacted briefing. He dialed it with shaking fingers. 2 rings, then a voice. Flat mail. No greeting. Command liaison. Ortega swallowed. Staff Sergeant Ortega. Camp Archer. I need to report a possible classified personnel identification. There was silence. Not dead air. He could hear typing in the background. Quiet. Measured like someone confirming this wasn't a prank. Go ahead, Sergeant. This line is secure. Ortega gripped the phone tighter. We have a retired female on base. She's not in uniform, but she's got ink marked with Detachment 1375. Owl insignia. 5 numbers. Black stencil. Another pause. Longer this time. He thought he heard a second voice in the background. Muffled but serious. You're certain of the tattoo? Absolutely. I've seen it before on classified documents. Northern Gate Fallback Corridor. April 2000. Status of personnel interaction. She was just told to leave. Uniform violation. Admin didn't know who she was. More silence. Then a low breath from the other end. Sergeant Ortega, you will immediately inform your commanding officer that this individual is to be treated with full courtesy and granted any support she requires. This comes from levels beyond your clearance. Yes, sir. Understood. One more thing, Sergeant. Yes. If anyone disrespects that woman again, they'll answer to people who don't wear name tapes. The line went dead. Ortega stood frozen for a moment, then slowly hung up the phone. His pulse still hadn't slowed. Major Patrick Quinn was in the admin conference room reviewing evaluation rosters when Ortega found him. The major looked up with narrowed eyes as the sergeant entered without knocking. Sir, Ortega said, keeping his voice level. We've got a situation. Quinn wasn't a man prone to drama. Combat veteran, Iraq twice. He listened carefully as Ortega relayed the call, not the classified parts, but enough. Enough for Quinn to get up without finishing his coffee. 10 minutes later, he was standing at the front desk with Lieutenant Bryce Gainan, who looked far too proud of himself for 8:15. Ma'am. Yes, sir, Gainan said, crisp and rehearsed. I advised her to change into base-appropriate attire. AR 671 specifies a lieutenant, Quinn interrupted. He set a printed document on the counter. This was in your inbox since Tuesday. Want to tell me why you didn't process it? Gainan glanced down. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I must have missed it. There was a backlog. Paperwork from you missed it, Quinn said flatly. So instead of following up, you decided to confront a decorated veteran about dress code. I didn't know you didn't read your damn email. Behind the glass doors, the track field was in full swing. The recruits had started their warm-up laps. Lena Brody sat on the bleachers, legs crossed, watching from a distance. She looked like any other observer. But Quinn knew better now. He picked up the document, folded it once, and tucked it into his pocket. I'm going to fix this, he said, then turned and walked out. Colonel Raymond Hale didn't like being interrupted during morning reviews. But when Major Quinn stepped into his office without knocking, document in hand, Hale stood. The colonel was a tall man, broad, square-shouldered. His silver crew cut razor-sharp even after PT. His ribbons told stories. For deployments, 2 citations for Valor, 1 bullet that never got removed. Quinn handed him the paper. It's Brody. Lena Brody, Detachment 1375. Hale stilled, then looked out the window. She was still there, sitting alone on the bleachers like a ghost. No one had noticed. He didn't speak, just took the authorization form, clipped it inside a folder, and walked out the door. The air outside had already begun to warm. On the field, the recruits were picking up speed. Their formation wasn't tight yet, stride lengths mismatched, breathing uneven, but they were trying. Lena watched them with the calm patience of someone who'd seen what came after training. The long months, the longer nights, the weight that came when the real mission started. She didn't look up when Hale approached. She'd felt him coming. He stopped 6 feet from her. Sergeant Brody." His voice carried. Not a shout, but firm enough that every head on the track turned. Lena slowly looked up. Hale didn't smile. Didn't offer his hand. His eyes were sharp, but there was something behind them. A depth most officers hid. "That tattoo on your back," he said. "Where'd you earn it?" She met his gaze. "Caspian Corridor, April 2000, NATO fallback route. I was rear fire team." He nodded once. A small motion, but it landed like a boulder. "My brother," he said quietly. "Private First Class Nathan Hale. Convoy security. You pulled him out after the second IED." Lena's jaw tightened. "I didn't know who was in the lead truck," she said. "Didn't matter." Hale's voice dropped just for her. "He made it home, married, had kids, died in his sleep last winter, peacefully, because of you." For the first time that morning, Lena's breath caught just slightly. "Good," she whispered. "That's good." Then Hale straightened and brought his hand up in a formal salute. It was crisp, precise, held just longer than regulation. The track fell silent. Every recruit, every staffer, every observer who happened to be looking watched. He dropped the salute and turned to the field. "If Sergeant Brody wants to wear that shirt," he said clearly, "she wears it. If she wants to run with my recruits, she runs. And if anyone has a problem with that," he looked toward the admin building, "they can come explain it to me personally." Then turning back to her, his tone softened. "If you'll walk with me, Sergeant, I'd like to make this right." Lena stood slowly, hoisting her duffel onto one shoulder like she had 1,000 times before. She nodded once. "Lead the way, sir." They walked together across the track, past the stunned recruits, past the junior officers who had stopped mid-count, past every soldier who had just witnessed the chain of command bend towards something greater than policy. Inside the admin lobby, silence took over. SPC Morrison stared down at his monitor, pretending to work. The two civilian staffers found sudden interest in filing cabinets. No one made a sound as Colonel Hale and Sergeant Brody passed through. At the end of the corridor, Hale opened the door to his office and motioned her inside. He closed it gently behind them, then sat at his desk, logged into a restricted network, and pulled up files that only a handful of people in the Pentagon could access. "Detachment 1375, he said without looking at her. "Night Owl Group records, redacted. Unit decommissioned after Northern Gate." He clicked through screen after screen. No photos, no citations, just timelines, coordinates, and casualty counts. "You saved 17 lives that day," Hale said, "held a defensive position for 43 minutes. No backup, no medevac, no cover." "Someone had to," Lena replied. He nodded. "There's a metal bronze star sitting in a vault no one visits. You'll never get a ceremony." "Don't need one," she said. "The ones who mattered got home. That's enough." Hale printed a single document, signed it with his own code, passed it across the desk, updated clearance. "You want to train our people, you train them in whatever you damn well please." Lena took the paper, folded it precisely, tucked it into her duffel. "Appreciate it, sir." Then she stood, and together they walked back into the hallway. This time, no one looked away. When Colonel Hale and Lena Brody stepped back into the midday glare, the atmosphere on the track had shifted. Recruits still moved in staggered loops, but their eyes drifted toward the bleachers where the colonel had made his stand. Whispers passed like wind, unspoken, but sharp. Everyone had seen it. The salute, the respect, the truth behind it still catching up to them. Hale didn't stop walking. He matched Lena's pace as they approached the training circle. Sergeant Waters, the senior NCO overseeing the evaluation, turned sharply and saluted. "At ease," Hale said, returning the gesture, his voice carried, steady and direct, effective immediately. "Sergeant Brody is authorized to conduct support training in any uniform components she deems appropriate. Command discretion." No one responded with words, but there was a stillness that fell over the crowd, subtle, but telling. He looked around at the gathered soldiers, officers, volunteers, then back at her. If anyone has concerns with that arrangement, Hale said, they can bring them directly to me. Then he turned toward the admin building through the reflective glass. Lieutenant Gainan was visible, still behind the desk. Hale held his gaze for half a breath. The message needed no words. Policy. He'd reminded them earlier. Serves the mission, not the other way around. Back inside, the return was different. No snide looks this time, no whispers. As Lena passed, one civilian quietly stood. Another straightened paperwork already stacked. Morrison nodded once without meeting her eyes. Hale opened the door to his office again and let her through first. The blinds were half drawn now. The light inside muted. Cool. Lena took the same seat, but her posture had changed. Not with pride exactly, just certainty, a kind of gravity that filled the room without sound. Hale sat again and leaned over the desk. The file still sat open where he'd left it. Scanned images, redacted blocks, embedded timestamps, nothing theatrical, just classified silence made digital. 17 lives, he said. Held the rear corridor with no backup. They called it 37 minutes in one report, but the real count was 43. Lena didn't flinch. We had rations for 2 hours, she replied. But half the combs were shot. I just held. Hale gave a small nod. Almost imperceptible. You were the only one who made it back. And then they buried the whole thing. They had to, she said. Too many flags on too many coffins. No one needed to know one woman was left carrying what 5 couldn't. He didn't argue. He just tapped a few keys and opened a restricted form, then typed in his clearance code. I'm issuing an operational support waiver. He said, you'll have access to our volunteer ranges, training fields, and personnel logs. This one's not going into standard channels. He printed a single sheet, signed it, handed it across. Lena took it, folded the paper once clean and straight, and slid it into the side pocket of her duffel. Then I guess I've got a run to catch. The recruits were lined up near the starting cone by the time she stepped back outside. Their breathing had steadied, their posture reset, but every single one of them was watching her now, not with confusion anymore, but quiet expectation. Sergeant Waters nodded as she approached. You'll pace? Lena gave a small smile. That's the idea. She dropped her duffel beside the bleachers again and rolled her shoulders once, loosening muscles that had long since learned discipline. No warm-up needed. Her body remembered this. Waters blew the whistle and the formation began to move. Lena fell into rhythm easily, placing herself at the front, not as a leader by title, but by presence. Her stride was smooth, not exaggerated, just efficient, every motion purposeful. The recruits behind her tried to match it. Some kept up, some didn't. But all of them saw it, how her breathing stayed steady, how her back remained upright even after the second lap when the sun began to press down harder and the air turned heavy. By the third lap, no one was questioning why she was there. They were just trying not to fall behind. Could her strength inspire a new generation? Lieutenant Gainan stood beside the bleachers, hands stiff at his sides. His face had lost its earlier confidence. He watched the pace group move, his eyes flicking between Lena and the struggling recruits. He waited until she came around again, just as they passed the midway mark. Then he stepped forward slightly. Sergeant Brody, he called out, careful to get it right. She turned her head just enough to see him in the corner of her eye. Didn't slow. I wanted to say, he began, then faltered. She raised one hand in a soft gesture. Not dismissive, just enough to stop him. You didn't ask, she said, and kept running. Colonel Hale remained by the track, arms crossed. He said nothing, just watched. Major Quinn had joined him by then, and after a few minutes, leaned over slightly. Think she'll let them catch up? Hale's eyes tracked Lena's stride, how she adjusted just slightly when someone behind her started to fall too far back. Never letting anyone quit, but never letting them coast either. Only if she wants to, he said quietly. The final lap ended with most of the formation bent at the waist, gasping for air. A few dropped to sit on the curb, sweat dripping, hands on their knees. But Lena, she wasn't winded, just standing tall, arms at her sides, breath even. She had paced them perfectly, not to break them, to show them what was possible. As the group began to disperse toward water stations in shade, Lena walked the track perimeter once more, slow this time, letting her body cool, letting the younger ones absorb the moment in their own way. She passed one of the younger women who trailed her for 3 laps. Now sitting in the grass with her boots half unlaced, the recruit looked up, face red and chest heaving. "You made that look easy," she said between breaths. Lena just gave a small nod. "It's not supposed to be easy," she replied. "It's supposed to be earned." By the time she returned to the bleachers, most of the crowd had cleared. The instructors were resetting cones, the medics checking hydration levels. The track buzzed with the scattered energy of transition. She grabbed her duffel and slung it over one shoulder. Behind her, Hale approached again. This time, no audience, just the two of them beneath the wide desert sky. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside her, looking toward the horizon where the ridgeline met the light. "We keep losing stories like yours," he said. "To time, to silence, sometimes to arrogance." "They're not mine alone," Lena answered. "No," Hale agreed. "But they're not gone. Not if they still shape the next ones." He offered a hand, not as a superior officer, but as a soldier. Lena took it. And in that quiet handshake was something heavier than metals, more permanent than any salute. Then she turned and walked toward the motor pool, not to leave, just to catch her breath before the next group hit the track. She wasn't done yet. Not even close. The heat had settled deep into the asphalt by early afternoon. Shadows shrank beneath parked trucks. The buzz of drills and cadence calls had faded into scattered echoes across Camp Archer. In the quiet behind the motor pool, Lena Brody sat alone on a low concrete step near her truck, elbows on knees, hands loose. She wasn't tired, not really. But her body had learned long ago to find stillness after movement. To let the silence settle in, to listen for the quiet things most people missed. A breeze came through, lifting dry dust into the sunlight. Somewhere nearby, a maintenance cart rattled past. A helicopter in the far distance wound up its rotors, slow and rhythmic, like a heart still beating after a long sprint. Lena closed her eyes just for a moment, not to rest, to remember. Footsteps approached, light, hesitant, the kind that didn't want to interrupt. Lena looked up. A young private stood a few paces away, holding a water bottle like it might keep her grounded. 19, maybe 20. Boots still new. Rank stitched so precisely it looked like it hadn't yet been through a single storm. "Ma'am," she said softly. "Sorry to bother you." Lena offered a small nod. An invitation, nothing more. The private stepped closer, eyes flicking between the duffel bag and the faint edge of the tattoo, just barely visible where Lena's shirt dipped at the collar. "Were you really with Night Owl?" she asked. Voice even quieter now. For a second, Lena didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because part of her had never said it aloud. She looked past the rows of trucks toward the edge of the base where the road disappeared into the desert. And for just a moment, she wasn't in Camp Archer anymore. The air had been thicker back then, acid with burning rubber and cordite. Gunfire echoed through a narrow valley where radios barely worked, and the terrain offered no cover. She remembered crouching behind an overturned vehicle, hands blistered from dragging bodies, shoulder torn where shrapnel had cut through flesh and Kevlar. Her team had been 6 at the start. By the end, it was just her and a broken headset looping static. One by one, they'd covered her, held flanks, tossed frags, fired blind when ammo ran low, and when there were no more voices in her earpiece, she kept firing anyway. 43 minutes, 17 lives saved. None of the names came back with her, just the silence, just the owl and the numbers burned into her skin. She finally said. The private sat on the curb nearby, leaving just enough space to be respectful. Her posture was rigid, like she didn't quite know how to relax in front of someone like Lena. "My cousin served in Afghanistan." She said he used to talk about Night Owl. Said no one knew if they were real, just ghost stories for new recruits. They were supposed to be, Lena replied, classified. No insignias, no credit, but you were there. The private whispered. You stayed. Lena looked down at her boots, then back up at the clear blue sky. I wasn't alone, but the others didn't come home. The young soldier's expression shifted from awe to something deeper, like the weight of the story had finally settled in her chest. I'm sorry, she said. Lena shook her head slowly. They didn't want pity. They wanted time. When they ran out, they gave me mine. For a while, neither of them spoke. The breeze kicked up again, tugging at the flag high above the admin building. Its shadow flickered across the gravel lot like a heartbeat. Then came the question Lena had been expecting. After all that, why'd you come back? The private's voice cracked slightly, like she didn't mean for it to sound so personal. Lena stood, brushing dust from the back of her shorts with methodical hands. She stretched once, slow and controlled, then turned toward the truck, but before climbing in, she looked at the girl, not as a recruit, not as a subordinate, just as someone who deserved an answer. Because someone has to show you, she said, what quiet strength looks like, what it means to serve without asking for applause, to carry what's heavy and keep walking. Anyway, the young woman looked down at her boots. Lena continued, her tone even. Out there, manuals won't cover everything. You'll be in places where the chain of command breaks down, where the mission shifts, where someone's counting on you to make the hard call. She paused. When that happens, you'll need more than rules. You'll need memory and muscle and the knowledge that silence doesn't mean weakness. That service doesn't require an audience. The girl nodded slowly, like trying to memorize the feeling, not just the words. Lena reached into her duffel and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the same one Colonel Hale had signed. She placed it gently into the private's hands. You'll be in charge someday. You'll need to know how to recognize the real ones. Then she stepped back, climbed into the Tacoma, started the engine. In her rearview mirror, Camp Archer began to shrink. The concrete walls, the empty bleachers, the thin trail of recruits still walking back from the track all grew smaller, but sharper, like something etched into her memory. Now she didn't look back at the admin building. Didn't need to. Whatever needed to be said had already been said without speeches, without awards, just a hand extended, a salute returned, a truth remembered. She turned onto the access road, gravel crunching beneath the tires, dust blooming in soft clouds behind her. The young private stood watching from the curb, holding the paper Lena had given her like it meant something more than ink and signature. And it did. Out beyond the wire, the desert opened wide, hot, empty, silent. But Lena felt no loneliness in it. She had carried the weight long enough to know what silence meant. It wasn't absence. It was honor. Unspoken. She glanced once more in the mirror. Camp Archer was just a smudge now on the flat horizon. But something there had changed. Not just policies, not just perceptions, something deeper. Next time someone mentioned Night Owl, it wouldn't be in hushed disbelief or behind closed-door rumors. It would be in the tone a young soldier used when asking a question that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, in how they answered when it was their turn to subscribe to graceful valor stories where quiet strength is celebrated, and every hero story finds a voice.